on and off for 20 years. It's like, but your accent hasn't changed.
Changed, yeah.
I've been here for 5 weeks and mine started to change. So there are people that are intentionally like driving to assimilate and like pick up second-class identity. So that's why our people are failing to thrive
in spaces like that. All right, good people, welcome to another episode of Pennyonn. I'm on life, I'm on things, I'm on people, I'm on conversations with some of my favorite people. And joining me is Mosito. Hello, Mosito.
How are you doing, my sister?
I am
friend?
good, and yourself?
I'm good. It's good to be here.
Good to be with me.
Yeah. Feels like a long time coming, some conversations.
Yes.
So I'm happy that I cracked an invite.
You know, you're a founding member of Pennyonn Conversations.
And they can't take that away.
No, they can't. They definitely can't.
I feel like I'm Malaysian now.
Yeah. So I was caught up in. I wanted to wear something written Soweto, and now I ended up with Madiba. I don't know what happened, but both of them for me, it's a state of mind. Like for me, Soweto now is a state of mind. The word Madiba is a state of mind. You know, you live in New York. New York is a state of mind. Mosito, the things that you're about is about a state of mind. Yeah. Would you agree?
I agree, yeah. Driven by intention.
And Mafikeng.
Yeah, Mafta.
Your favorite place.
It's a big part of my identity for sure, yeah. So it is a state of mind driven by intentionality. That's driven by love for black people and love for narrative shifting. So I believe that for me, we're at the nexus where we need to take back our narratives and our storytelling. There's a Ghanaian proverb, and stop me if I'm talking too much, but there's a Ghanaian proverb that says, until lions have their own biographer, tales of hunting will always glorify the hunter. Yeah. So the African story has always been told by Westerners through lenses that are not ours. So I'm taking it upon myself to make sure that, you know, we take back our narrative. Yeah. So
both your name and your surname, so you are of Southern Sotho descent. Yeah. So Mosito is like in rhythm, and then Ramaili.
Yeah, you know, so we don't have the letter D.
Yeah, the letter D.
So L-I is pronounced D, so Ramaili.
Yeah,
that's the right way to say it, but South Africans always say Ramaili or Ramaili.
So is it always something that people always ask you about?
It's always been a thing, because I mean, I grew up also like in these white schools where sometimes like there's a lot of cultural surrendering, so I think that is why I am like driven by intentionality. So it's like it's readdressing all those things. So like it's very rare for people to say my last name properly. So yeah.
So it's Ramaili.
Yeah, Mosito Ramaili.
Yeah, I wanted to say it properly.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I wanted to say it properly. So, are you born in Lesotho or you born in South Africa?
No, I was born in Bloem actually.
In central South Africa?
Yeah, I was born in Bloem to two Sotho parents. My father was from Soweto. Okay. My mother was born in Tabanchu. So I'm a family of nomads. Yeah, so like my identity is very much Mosito, but from Mafikeng. So so that is the thing about me. Like there is not like one central identity or location that I claim, because I've been so nomadic. I was saying to my friends yesterday that I've actually never lived in any one city for 8 consecutive years. So like I've always been on the road.
So it's 7. There's a
7
shift.
and gone, which is weird. It's unplanned, but it always works out that way. So even now, in as much as I'm spending so much time here this year, it's actually my 7th year. So it feels like my gods are nudging me to look at home properly instead of, you know, being a visitor, which I've been a visitor to my own country and culture for 10 years. So as, you know, I'm driving storytelling and exporting our culture internationally, there's an opportunity for me to further entrench myself and earn my stripes again as a South African. So I'm learning how to be not a visitor, but like intentionally owning being back home. So I'm really giving myself permission of being back home. So a lot of people keep saying, when are you going back? I'm like, but this is my home.
This is my home. Why are you chasing me away? Yeah. So, and they're like, how long is Mosito here for? I'm like, for as long as he wants. Why are you guys asking? Okay, so let's go back. So you have always been into soccer?
Yeah, that's my first love. I grew up playing. Back then it was called Southern Transvaal. I made the South African under-12 team years ago in '95. We played the curtain raiser before South Africa played Argentina. And then I went to college on a soccer scholarship. In college, so in high school, I went to school in Kimberley Boys. I made the KFC.
The famous Kimberley Boys High. Okay.
So we went to the KFC Cup. I was the top goal scorer in that tournament. Then I got a contract offer from Jomo Sono.
Okay.
So I went to Jomo Cosmos between 2000 and 2001. And being a child of an academic, my mother just like, this is not going to work out for me. So then she quickly gets me a scholarship to go to the US and study marketing and play football. So football's always been central to my life. And then after college, I was a first-team All-American. I got signed by Real Salt Lake City.
Okay.
But unfortunately, I did my knee. I tore my ACL. But fortunately for me, you know, in the US, on these scholarships, you have to maintain a certain grade point average in order for you to keep your athletic scholarship. So I was able to fall back on my education, as you'd say.
Awesome.
So, but then even post that, I then moved to, I worked at Nike. I was brand director for Nike Football. So
I know someone else who comes from Kimberley, who went on a scholarship to the US, and they worked for Nike in marketing. That's Terry Kalafeng.
Literally.
Oh my God. Okay.
So honestly, like I always said to Terry, like I always thank him for having, like, you know, blazed the path for me, you know, and that's why, like, I intentionally actually started building a relationship with him, because he's somebody that I look up to very much as a professional, and also
a
having
marketer,
the background from Kimberley. So our path are very similar to me. And even now, as I'm finding my voice as a Pan-African, obviously.
Yes, he's
like with Brand Africa. So very much so. I feel like he laid the foundation. I'm grateful enough to be walking on the path that he sort of laid the foundations for me. Yeah, so,
okay, there's a bike passing. Harley is just drove past. Awesome. I love it. Okay, so that's your Kimberley story, how it starts. But how do you end up in Mafikeng? And you know, Kimberley has got its own energy. It's a small, big town with a big hole that's got a great history of diamonds in our country, and it's hot as hell. Actually, there's a place called Hot as Hell, not far from Hot as Hell. Yeah. Yes. Not. It's between Kuruman and Kimberley. The Hot as Hell. So how do you land? Do you land in Mafikeng because your mom was working there? Your parents were working there?
My mother used to work for the University of Botswana. My mother was a college professor.
So it's the University of Northwest currently.
University of the Northwest. And then my dad was he worked in local government. So my dad has a law background, and then my mother was in education. But then my schooling was always in Joburg. I went to school at St. Martin's Prep School. So like it's like that's what I'm saying. Like it's very emblematic of my life. I've always been a nomad. So Mafikeng was always home, and I always felt like I was just visiting on holidays, you know. But then like my schooling, like my prep school foundation was in Joburg. Then I went to Kimberley Boys High for high school. Then I went to Huntsville, Alabama for college.
Okay.
Then I lived in San Francisco. So like I'm a proper global citizen, I'd like to think. But now, that's why I want to spend as much time on the continent as I have spent outside the borders of this continent.
So when you look back to 13-year-old Mosito, who's thrust into this crazy world, scholarships and things like that, what was your understanding of what was South Africa and what was happening with our country at the time?
Look, I mean, I come from a family that's very astute politically. I'm a child of Pan-Africanism, so like I grew up in a household where I write what I like when I was 8. Long Walk to Freedom was gifted to me at 10. So I think I've always been aware of the transitions that are happening in this country. And I think also pre-94, I went to a private school. So like I could see the anxieties in white people seeing the transition happening, you know what I mean? So so like I think to answer your question, I think I've always been politically aware in terms of like where the country was heading. And I think part of that was also me wanting to straighten my back and being a black South African that's contributing to the narrative of this country, because I came from two people that had contributed to this country, you know what I mean? My mother wrote the early curriculums of 95 in New South Africa. So I come from a family where it's our responsibility to sort of be additive to this country. So I'm just in a long line of people from my bloodline that have, you know, tried to be additive people to this nation.
Why is that important to you?
I think it's important to be one. I think it's driven by my faith as a Muslim, and two, as a Pan-African. So I believe that, you know, we are on this earth to give away these skills and these abilities that God has given us. You know, so like me, my main skill that I think God has given me is the ability to build communities and build communities with intentionality, but tell stories. You know what I mean? So I could never exist at the peripheries of society. You know what I mean? Like I said, like I think I'm one of those people that I want to disrupt this world in a good way. Like I want my people or my children to say, you know what, my dad, he dared to do this. You know what I mean? So I think legacy is a big thing for me. You know, so that's why I want to do it. I think to answer your question, I want to build a legacy, and also because I've seen people that have built legacies, and they say you can't be what you don't see. So I saw all those great people. So then I also want the next black generation of black kids to see that there's a kid from Mafeking who dared to be a global citizen and did it on his terms by the grace of God. You know what I mean? So I do believe that I have a certain privilege that I've been given, but that privilege is for me to share. And incite, not incite, but like to awaken dreams in our people, because you know, a lot of our peers in this country, people are bereft of dreams. You know, like I want people to push for their dreams and fight for their dreams. You know what I mean? So I'm one of those people.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to have a conversation with you is that, you know, South Africa right now, and it's almost like, you know, because I guess I've been in the entertainment industry for as long as I have, as a dreamer myself, I remember in the early 90s, like people coming back into South Africa who had lived in different parts of the world and bringing the excitement and energy and wanting to pour into this country. Like I met Americans, Ghanaians, British people, students, you know, adult, vice versa, South Africans and non-South Africans. And then you're that young person who's your life since the dawn of democracy has been always going out there. And, you know, so I was always wondering, like, right now with South Africa, there's this reimagined way of Africa, but South Africa has just found its place and its voice through music and cultural expression. And you've been out there with different things, you know, starting with soccer. And for a lot of kids, it's like, I want to go to America, I want to go to London, I want to do this. And the question is, and then you go there, and then what? You know, what is your story? And then if you're an artist, like the importance of carrying, I don't know, the message of the nation or whatever responsibilities that, you know, things that you talk about. Like, how do people become conscious and you know, take cognizance of that instead of just like, if I can just make it and I made it, because you realize when you're out there that. If you just come and it's just a penny story, it doesn't really lend.
It's not going to resonate.
It doesn't resonate,
Yeah, that's a great one. I think, one, to go back to what you're saying, yes, South Africa, there is an acknowledgement that our culture is at an ascendancy, right? Like, and it's giving us a lot of social cachet. And as a South African that lives outside the borders of this country, that's why I wanted to take the stranglehold on how our culture is exported, right? Because, like to my point, if we're not telling our stories the right way,
someone else is going to make conversion.
Shows up this way. So for me, narratives are very important. So as our music is driving the world, I mean, we saw Tyler, even film-wise, you know, like even from the art perspective, it's important for South Africans to be part of the art, the exporting of our culture. So as a global citizen or as a South African that lives away from home, I call myself a cultural exilee. So as a cultural exilee, I can see the impact of our culture, but also adversely, I've seen how if people don't take a lead on their culture, it easily gets eroded. I mean, we see with Afro beats. I mean, it's been less than 10 years, but the Nigerians aren't really at the forefront of exporting their culture. We're seeing with hip hop, they've lost hip hop in 50 years. Like now, like, I mean, I live in New York, like I was like the 50 years of hip hop celebration, like there were no black people, you know what I mean? So
until I think they started like doing their own thing on the side. You know, you saw Will Smith putting something else over there. You saw someone else, which is
So it goes to us stopping. We're too passive in our culture. We're consumers in our culture instead of being the paragons of our culture. You know what I mean? So that's what I want to readdress. Like if I'm dancing to music to a person that looks like you, it's incumbent that the person behind the mic or the production looks like these people, or even in these brand rooms. So because I exist in these corporate America spaces, it's important that, like I'm saying, it's important that we're creating aperture and space for our people to be there. So presence and representation matters to me.
So that's my next question for you was, I mean, when I look at like the rest of the continent, and maybe if we focus on West Africa, for example, Nigerians and Ghanaians, I'll use them, and maybe a little bit of the Brits, which is the diaspora in the bigger essence. But if we focus on Nigerians with Afrobeats and maybe a little bit of Nollywood, there's Nigerians who are in corporate, who sit in certain rooms, in certain spaces, therefore they can be able to to influence a certain narrative. And we're only 30 years in democracy, and we have a few, if none South Africans in those rooms. And whether people, you know, are members of like the academy, or whether they're members of, you know, the academy in terms of music, or the film awards, or they sit on SAG, or they sit in you know, I don't know, some Nike creative, whatever, on all these big global brands, which when they land on the continent, they land in South Africa. But what they do here is very minimal, diluted compared to what they actually do elsewhere in the world. What happens on the other side when they talk about us in the continent? How significant is that to just have a Nigerian over here, a South African over there, a Ghanaian over there, in that room?
It's very important. I think, you know, my only criticism of South Africans that we don't travel enough in order for us to have presence in these rooms. And I think it's a result of coming from, I mean, I always say this country is heaven on earth, right? So it's very difficult. Remember, other countries, they left in jaws because of economic situations, you know what I mean? Like, some of them it's war, you know? So like, South Africa is such a fertile and stable environment and country where our people don't see the need to leave this country, which is also like, to our bereft, you know what I mean? To our disadvantage, rather. So it's absolutely important to be in those rooms, because it's West Africans that are given then the baton to tell a South African story, you know what I mean? So later on, I think there's an opportunity for South Africans to stop trying to be the most Western African nation. You know what I mean?
The most Western African nation,
which is why which is why these multinationals were always set up in South Africa, right? Because we always put up our hands, oh, we've got a thriving infrastructure, you know what I mean? So there's this acknowledgement that South Africans need to also stop this exceptionalism that we have, and I think we either the continent. And that's why there's always like these little outbursts of xenophobia. There's always these outbursts of saying, like, if I go to Tanzania or Lagos, people say, oh, we are Africa. You know what I mean? So like, we need to like sort of get rid of the silo that apartheid actually created in our people. You know what I mean? Because that political situation almost said to our people, yes, you live under these apartheid conditions, but you're better off than go Zimbabwe, go Lesotho. So like, our people have carried that into democracy. So we also haven't done the work to learn about this continent as South Africans, you know what I mean? So like, I think our general knowledge of this continent is poor as a people. I mean, when I travel across the continent, like, people in Nigeria would tell me about Mafike and Mosito. Like, in this country, we probably don't even know anything beyond Ibadan or Lagos, you know what I mean? So,
that's true.
So like, I think we also have to do the job as Africans from South Africa.
From a South African point of view.
Okay. That makes sense.
It does. It does make sense. But also, I think, I also think that Africans who are in South Africa also have a responsibility of educating, incorporating, embracing, working with local South Africans. Because that's the other thing. There's a, you know, the fact that there's a lot of Africans here, Johannesburg, Cape Town, Pretoria, but there's this thing of like, it's us and them. That also is very problematic. But I mean, obviously as creatives, that's not really our reality. Our reality is that we interface with different people from different parts of the continent, you know, as friends, as colleagues, as lovers, etc. Whereas ordinary South Africans who are in the middle of Pimville, you know, or Soshanguve, don't necessarily have the similar experience that me and you have.
It's an access thing, right? It's an access and an awareness piece, you know what I mean? So I think also, this working in silos, you have to give credit to the genius of colonialism and apartheid.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So like, our people do still function in these silos. So that's why I always say, our opportunity and our greatest ability is collaborating at the intersection of our disciplines. And I think as creators, because we allow ourselves to be vulnerable to learn about certain cultures, so we understand the importance of collaborating versus other people that just exist in these silos of, I'm just an accountant or, you know what I mean, I'm an engineer. So like, they don't give themselves that opportunity to break the silos, you know what I mean? So right, it's an existential thing.
That's what that's how to do. Okay, talking about silos, so I think, I don't remember where you were talking, speaking somewhere, and again, we always make reference to what Nigerians and maybe Ghanaians, when they show up, they show up as a force, as a collective. Runa, it's just me, little Penny on my own there. I mean, even if you look at, for example, the current Grammys, there were so many Ghanaian parties, there were so many Nigerian parties in LA. I don't know how many South African parties were there, even though we won the Grammy.
Absolutely. It's also, it's cultural. You know what I mean? Like, so the Nigerian culture, I always say African, the American culture and Jamaican culture, like they're very A-type, you know what I mean? Like they draw attention to their culture, like in their heritage. Versus Rona South Africans, our starting foundation is Uska Papa, like don't draw too much attention to
yourself. Yes.
So that's what we need to break.
We need
like,
to break
we need
that.
To take pride in ourselves, like so
Pennyonn Papa.
So South Africans, the more you straighten your back and take pride in yourself, Barwa Papa. You know what I mean? And you realize like it's actually to our disadvantage. So like we need to inculcate a sense of pride in people. So you know what? There's nothing wrong in saying I'm South African. Like it's a very dope country. You know So I think it's a cultural mindset that that whereas Nigerians like, and I think also it's a numbers thing. You know what I mean? Like because there's so many of them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 200 million Nigerians in Nigeria. There's over 150 outside Nigeria. So like they're forced to stand out. And us as a people, like I said, our social training is let the work speak for you, Marwana. Don't tell the world how dope you are.
Okay, but the thing is, when we get out of South Africa, that doesn't really work in our favor.
Yeah, and we also, the other thing is when we leave our country, we acclimate. You'd be surprised. I mean, I run a community of South Africans in New York. There's over 4,000 of us there, but the number of them that, like within day two, people like second-class Americans, like our people assimilate and acclimate too much. Like people aren't led by our culture. You know what I mean?
Do you know, I also picked that up with like people when they move to Cape Town.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, why are you guys in Cape Town pretending like you're not from Joburg? So where to Soshanguve? You're like, Kurili, you're here in Cape Town. Suddenly, I'm gonna go to the farms. I'll be watching some artwork. I'm like, Vorvayang Batoba.
I mean, there's always an example that I always use when I love. So South Africans in New York, like we try to hang out around like cultural days, and so like body public holiday, you know, like last year we had this braai in September on Heritage Day, and I was braaiing. So this young lady comes up to me, she's like, so how long have you been here for? So I tell her, so I've been living there on and off for 20 years. I left in 2004. So I'm like, no, been on and off for 20 years. It's like, but your accent hasn't changed. I've been here for 5 weeks and mine started to change. So there are people that are intentionally like driving to assimilate and like pick up second-class identity. So that's why our people are failing to thrive
in spaces like that.
Spaces because, you know, in America, like the one thing that Americans look for is authenticity.
Babe.
You know what I mean? Even if you would be authentic, and if with cheese boy, like so, like be that. So that's why like a lot of our people, like even rappers or whatever, like they go there like, but they sounding like Americans, and people like, what's the point of consuming you? Like, you know, I can get that from the Bronx or from Atlanta. So I think authenticity is a missing piece in a lot of our people in terms of really taking ownership of our culture and correcting someone and say, hey, my name is actually Mosito. Like, don't call me Mo. You know what I mean? So like, it's about owning who we are as a people. It's about telling our stories authentically. So that is a piece that I think is lacking in our generation of South Africans. Like because of our consumption behavior patterns are so American. Like the music is drummed down our throat. Like you watch TV, like it's all American content. So we're in such a hurry to show Americans that we like that.
You know I mean? Which is meanwhile, they're trying to learn our dance moves. Meanwhile, they're trying to understand here, like, what Izolo means.
Like when they come here, like we want to take them to gated communities. Like they want to consume our culture the right way. So I think
this one time, you just remember this one time Jaru was in the country, and then there was like this press conference at the Hilton, and then I was like, Jaru, are you gonna go to Soweto? And he was like, is that a club?
You know. So Libona as well. So I think that is the other missing piece. Like there's the education piece because, you know, I always say we have to unlearn what we've been told as a people, and we have to relearn what it means to be South African, right? And then we can learn how to move as South Africans. Then we can learn to fully export our culture, be authentic storytellers of our culture. In doing that, it means we have to educate these people about who we are as a nation.
And unapologetically 100%,
so. 100%. So like that is the work that I do. So like I do some work with Brand South Africa. So as we're telling our stories away from the country, we're doing it with authenticity. You know what I mean?
Okay. So let's impress the kids because you know the kids want to know why is this guy speaking like this? Okay. So we spoke about how you went on the scholarship. Then you came. Did you come back straight and work for Nike when you came back?
When I graduated, so I went to school in Alabama. When I graduated, I got a job in San Francisco. Actually, I lived in Oakland, but I worked in San Francisco. I worked for Levi Strauss.
The jeans people.
I worked in retail at Levi Strauss. I did that for a year and a half. And then I moved back to South Africa just pre-2010. I was homesick and I wanted to
Before
be
the
here.
World Cup.
Yeah,
You wanted to be here for the World Cup.
I wanted to be here, you know.
Great times.
And then I just happened to be out and, you know, in me, I love people, like in talking to people. Then I then meet who was then the CMO of KFC. And then she offered me well, I had to apply for it.
Yeah.
Chief
Marketing Officer.
Yeah. So I started off at Young Brands as an assistant brand manager, working sponsorship. So I did the KFC and the Idols thing. So seeing these red cups actually is a trip down memory lane. We used to have those red cups with the Colonel's face, Unati and Randall, and I forgot who the other judge was.
Yeah,
so
Gareth Cliff.
So KFC was dope because it also brought me closer to culture. In doing that, we then doing the Idols piece. We did the deal with Cricket South Africa, so it used to be called Baker's Mini Cricket. So
I remember that. So actually, a neighbor of mine in Pimville, used to be a cricket coach where I grew up, and she used to do those Baker's Saturday workshop, mini cricket with the kids. So she was one of the coaches, and then she would bring us those biscuits. Like my first way of understanding cricket was through her because she was like my neighbor, and she was a teacher, and then she was doing cricket coaching. So you got a scholarship with? Did you got a scholarship with KFC or something at some point when you were young?
No, it was actually with MTN. So how about mini cricket? Because I was also very talented in cricket. So I played Gauteng cricket. I played PG under 15 South Africa. And then the late Kaya Majola. So back then, diversity was a thing in cricket. So the late Kaya Majola, who was head of development at Cricket South Africa, he then got MTN to get me a scholarship to go to. So that's how I got to Kimberley. So the last time my mother ever paid for my schooling, I was 9 years old. Like
how do we raise children like you where we don't have to pay for school fees?
So, so I've always been on scholarship. So like I've always used my God-given sporting ability to get to sort of to get an education. You know what I mean? Because obviously then after Kimberley Boys High, I then, like I said, got a scholarship to go overseas to Alabama. So yeah, so cricket was very, very central. And the funny thing is, in as much as I'm vocal about my love for football, cricket is actually my first true love.
Wow.
I've been going to the Wanderers since 1993. Like, I'm one of those nerds. Like, I always go to, like, one of the things that I look forward to the most when I'm back home is going to the Wanderers, and then going to Cape Town for the January 1st test match. So I love cricket.
That annual January 1st test match, down in Cape Town.
So I'm a product of people taking opportunities. So that's why, Lena, like, I have this philosophy that I live by. It's get on, put on. So as long as I get on, it's my role.
I'm going to write that down.
My other people.
You know, I have my notes here. I take nuggets. Get on, put on.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, because like I said, I'm a direct product of people.
Get on, be on, or put on.
Get on, put on. So if you get on, you get given a pedestal. It's up to you to put the next person on.
Pennyonn.
That too.
I love it.
You left me hanging.
I did. I'm sorry. I didn't see that. I'm being distracted. Distractions over here.
Yeah, so,
okay, cool. Yeah. I love that. Okay, so for the youngsters, I mean, Nike, multi-choice, Mnet.
Yeah, so after KFC, I moved to Mnet. So at Mnet, I was foisted on starting 3 television channels. So I started, or not started, but I was
part of the team.
I was a marketing manager back then. That started Mzansi Magic. We started Vuzu TV, Mzansi Wetu. So we did Isbaya, that famous show. So like I always say, we added to the lexicon of this country, because after Isbaya, everybody was calling each other Bafo and all. Like I think we actually made Zulu culture dope and sexy.
Dope,
doper than
it was.
So, and I take pride in that time because, you know, when we got to Mnet, we were, like I said, so changing narratives is very central to my theme as a person, because when we got to Mnet, it was just a team of young black guys, and we intentionally also wanted to partner with young black creators, and like, the mandate there was like, we're always going to show our people at our best, you know what I mean?
Love it.
So working with guys like The Bomb, we're able to tell like authentic stories. Guys we did a show called Ayeye where we're showing black creatives in advertising. You know what I mean? So like, so for us, it's always, like I say, like, you can't be what you don't see. So
and this is the 2000s, so that becomes like a 2000s. So this becomes like a second generation of young people who transitioned with our country from, you know, the late 90s into the early 2000s as you were teenagers. And now in the mid 2000s, you're like, you're getting opportunities and you're going into spaces
And you're right. Remember, our generation, like we grew up watching Generations. No pun intended. You know what I mean? Like we had voices like yours. We had Bob Marvin on radio. So like we knew what dope black excellence was in the creative space, and it gave a lot of us creatives permission to have conversations with our parents that we want to be marketers. We want to study advertising because we'd seen, people that led that path for us. So I think when we then, after we got put on, we then like wanted to tell and open up the aperture because we come from such a traditional culture where you have to be a doctor, you have to be this, you have to be that. So like, there's all these career spaces that our people didn't have knowledge of. You know what I mean? So I think us working in television, that's why at Mnet we wanted to tell stories of black people in advertising. You know what I mean? I mean, if you watch a show like Isbai, people don't know this, but Isbai is actually it's based on the Capulets and the Montague family. It's star-crossed lovers, but we just added an African layer to it, and then you said,
get out of here.
Nomza Mombata and that guy, like they loved each other, but because their family were from warring tax effects. It's a classical Romeo and Juliet. We wanted to add like an African layer to it. So it's about knowing our cultures and then knowing like Western stories that resonate, and then like marrying those two. So like we have to be culturally tapped in. So
Okay. So when you're part of that energy, what is going on through your mind? Like, where do I want to go next? What happens after that?
That's always been a challenge for me. Like you can never give language to what I do, because I think God is just. I think my interests are so vast, but like they're always anchored around creativity. But now I'm realizing that, in as much as I've been giving lots of privilege and access to doors that like the very rare, so like now I'm using my love for creativity and storytelling to getting into policy making. So like now like I advise like the South African ambassador to the US, like I'm a UNDP cohort member. So like now like I'm doing work with like the president of Nigeria. So like I'm realizing that the formal spaces or the political class don't know creativity, and it's going to be creativity that's going to tell the African story. Because I mean, we know that they say by 2030, 60% of the world's youth are going to be African, right? So it's important that we're telling these African stories. So now I'm realizing that I'm sort of pivoting to policy making. So like I've sort of taken like a leadership role in terms of like my generation of guys, because I'm realizing that we need to marry this creativity with policy making.
We have to,
So I think that's going to be my next my next chapter. Like I said, I think I always have this weird thing of reinventing myself every 7 years. So I think honestly, now I'm going to use this. Go on.
Because after all, I mean, life is like a cycle of sevens.
It's always like that. Always like that. That's why now I've always opened myself to expressing all these abilities that God has given me. Like at some point in my life, I was an athlete. Then like I got into marketing, and then in 2020 when George Floyd happened, so I've always wanted to work in advertising. So when George Floyd was made a martyr, there was so America was sort of like at a crisis, and like so diversity became a thing. So I then used that opportunity to pivot into advertising, and I was fortunate enough to work at a great creative agency, Droga 5, working on Hennessy's, and I got to work with people like Nas, you know what I mean? So now like I'm like, okay, the last 5 years I've got to work in advertising, so that's why last year
not only did you work with Nas, Miguel, Kendrick Lamar, Q-Tip, you worked at Starbucks, Facebook, FedEx.
I mean it's some crazy. Sometimes like I look at those brands, I'm like, what? I'm a kid from African. Like I worked with Mark Zuckerberg and all these.
Yeah, like I mean, like BBDO in New York is not. It's like the heart of like advertising.
It's the greatest creative agency in the world. If you watch the show called Mad Men,
Don
Draper.
It's based on.
So actually, my role at BBDO, I was the global head of account management. I was literally Don Draper. So my office was where they shot that show.
Get out of here.
Yeah. If you watch the movie Mad Men is actually based on BBDO New York.
We better find that Mad Men and put it in this episode. Okay. Yeah, go on.
So I mean, I think it's part of that. So for me, I've never been scared by titles, or like I've never been scared to pursue what I think is possible. You know what I mean? So like I think that's always maybe it's a level of being naive. You know what I mean? So like I've never been intimidated by these things, and I think because I grew up playing sports, you know what I mean? Like I've played football in front of 30,000 people, so I've been nervous before. So for me, to have a meeting with Mark Zuckerberg to tell me, hey man, Meta is actually a dumb idea, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, with Howard Schultz, the owner of Starbucks, so when we're working on like the most recent campaign, I think it's been able to, because I have knowledge of the subject matter, and like I said, like I think sports has taken away this unnecessary need to because people have certain titles you're scared of. So like now I've always been able to look at fear. Like, I mean, I always say I eat fear for breakfast, honestly. You know what I mean?
You eat fear
yeah, absolutely.
for breakfast.
Yeah.
Okay, I eat fear for breakfast.
Yeah, in order to have glad tidings for lunch. You know, to have lessons for lunch.
Get out of here. I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so being a young boy, born in South Africa with all these big dreams, and now, how old are you now?
I turned 40 if God allows me to see it next month. Yeah. I'm turned 41. I'm 40 right now.
Yeah?
I turned 41 on the 21st of April.
21st of April.
Yeah.
You know, the story of like young black men in this country in the last 30 years, 40 years, to elevate, to propel themselves to the next level, and a lot of challenges that they have to face in a world that's pro-women, that's constantly shifting. And here you are, you've gone to different places in the world. What's going on with a black boy? And you've seen it from the worst point, like in the US, and you've got experiences with friends here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I have an intimate experience. So I'm actually one of the founders of a movement called Dope Black Dads. We created a global movement of black fathers. So what I'm seeing, I spend a lot of time in the UK, obviously Brooklyn where I live, and here. A lot of black men my age are struggling to find their place in this world, right? Like you're saying, because now we live in a world where your partner's probably making more than you. So like a lot of our identities as black men has always been because you bring the bacon.
Provision.
The man, you know what I mean? Or work-wise, the patriarchy is a real thing. So a lot of black men are struggling to find voice or their voice. That's why, like, I mean, you're hearing that South Africa is home to like one of the highest suicide rates in the world. You know what I mean? Alcoholism is becoming a thing. So like, a lot of our peers are not looking at themselves in the mirror and challenging themselves and being able to pivot and adjust to where
and
the
it's a
world is
global
headed.
conversation, because I saw Thierry Henry had this conversation, I think, with Stephen Bachelet as well, about vulnerability, and I was just
the fact that Henry said he went through depression,
and it was like, what do you mean Henry went through?
He's someone that actually do a lot of work with Thierry, and he's actually when he's one-on-one, he talks about his vulnerabilities. His vulnerabilities were due to his father lived his life through Thierry. You know what I mean? So,
and most parents do that with their children who are successful.
So the vulnerability piece is the other one. So mental health, like a lot of our peers are taking a knock. Guys are scared to say, you know, like I'm in therapy. You know what I mean? So I think this whole being African and this patriarchy, like we're not allowing ourselves to be human. And like we should know that first and foremost, before you're an African, you're a human being. You know,
before you're a man, you're a human being.
So that is part of the work that I'm doing with black men. Like we have these summits where now we're bringing like, you know, leaders of industry across all facets of the spectrum to let guys know that, hey man, it's fine to have gone through relationships that didn't work out. It's fine to be a baby daddy that's struggling. It's fine to, like, you know, I mean, economically we're seeing what's happening in the world, layoffs. I mean, I live in America where people are getting laid off for fun. Here back home, people are getting retrenched. So it's fine to actually move back home if you lost that apartment in 4 years, you know what I mean?
And it's fine if you made a career move that didn't work out, to take those lessons and you keep reinventing yourself.
Because life, you know, I always say, what is critical is that you have to put yourself in the arena of life. Too many people cower away from putting themselves in the arena of life. So being in the arena of life, it means that you will have disappointments, you will have failures, you know what I mean? Like, so failure for me, I love failure, you know, because failure is an opportunity to keep going again, you know what I mean? So people are uncomfortable with failure. Like, I always say,
maybe sports is the one that sort of like gave you that edge and that advantage, because sports, taught you that, of course, sports is able to teach you that.
And also living in New York City. In New York, like, no 2 days are the same, you know what I mean? And also in the country, remember in America, you live in a country where there's no labor laws in the US. So literally you can get to work and get fired. Like the stuff that you see in the movies, you know what I'm saying? Like, So you're always on edge in the US. Like, you always have to produce and be on your A game. And also having played sports so competitive. So, like, I think it's allowed me to navigate through life, you know what I mean?
But that can also be hard on, like,
100%.
one's mental health and literally on the body.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I was saying to my friends, like, I felt so drained towards the end of last year. That's why last year I literally bought a one-way ticket. I said, I'm going to go to South Africa.
And then I'll figure out when I want to come back,
So, like, you're right, like, there is a negative converse to, like, always being on the edge, being driven, like, you know what I mean, like, you know, like, poof, doof, 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 you know what I mean? So, like, I'm also allowing myself to, like, be a recluse, you know what I mean? Like, denying my time to people, my access to people, you know what I mean? Because I'm learning to fill my cup, and, like, that can only be done by me spending time on myself, you know what I mean? Yeah.
So when you, and then I don't like to say compare, but like when you look at like the work that you do in the UK and some of the gents that you deal with in the UK and versus in the US, and you look at like where we are as South Africans, before you even look at the rest of the continent, you know, how you're evolving as a black man and some of the challenges that you have to deal. I know our democracy is only in 30 years. You know, black boys in the UK might have dealt with racism in different eras, you know, in the US versus what's going on in South Africa. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, with the South African
or race relations more than racism.
I mean, in the South African one, it's weird, right? Because politically we're very aware, but we're not having like the real political conversations in terms of like nudging society forward. I find that a lot of political discourse in this country is very opportunistic centered, you know what I mean? It's like a jobs for, it's a, I want to be a politician, like people make it a career versus being a politician, like it should be a calling because it's a servant-led calling, you know what I mean? So I find that we haven't really had like the real political discourses in this country because every time we're supposed to have them, like there's a new political party, you know what I mean?
Emerging,
So like I don't think we're allowing ourselves to have like these real conversations. Say, you know what, like we don't fucking need another
political party every new election.
If you're really in love with this country, like let's create like an alternative party. So all you 5 million parties that are saying can do a better job than they see, go away for a boss barad for a week.
And come back with one
and say we support this party, you know what I mean? Versus like because the politics of this country are very reactionary, you know what I mean? I didn't make the NEC of the Northwest Party.
Therefore I'm starting a party.
You know what I mean? So like it feels like it's not anchored in moving our society forward, you know what I mean? Versus the US, their politics is very much race based, you know? And it's weird.
And class-based.
And very class-based. But I think ours is more classes than race-based. You know, like South Africa, we have to admit that there's a massive classism that happens in this country. Like there's also like this made-up black middle class that is so out of touch with what's happening with the majority of our people.
Which is 2 checks away from reality.
Away, by the way, we maybe 1 check, I'd say, to be honest.
I mean, in the serial economy and load shedding, quite frankly, it's
Yeah, so like there's this, we're sort of, like you said, because we're such a young
democracy,
democracy 30 years old, we want to catch up and have this material attainment and aggrandizement that is actually not, it's not matching with like people's economic.
Firstly, it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable.
And by all means, you know, somewhere, somehow, there's some form of illegal, illegitimate corruption form of some sort that actually people are fast-tracking themselves to wealth. That it's like, this doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah. So to answer your question, or to be, I think the best amongst our people are not participating in the political discourse. So that's why we're in this mess as a society. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, because I also feel like we've given politicians so much power, whereas spheres of influence, there's so many areas of influence besides politics.
In this country, politicians are like athletes and artists.
For what?
You know what I mean?
It doesn't make sense to me.
So like it's a Roman circus. It's all the distractions, and like I think our society has just bought into it.
But I also think that we've just abdicated our responsibility as ordinary citizens. Like I say, I mean, economics is one influence, family is one influence, education, faith. You know, there's so many areas that influence a nation. But it's almost like we're all folding our hands, we're looking at politicians. And you were talking about growing up in Bophuthatswana, you know, people in Bophuthatswana and like all other black communities, people had a sense of self and wanting to do
pride,
things for themselves and
yeah,
pride. And you know, like you said, you get on and you put on. You know, you get into spaces. You want to see more people come in there, but more than anything else, you hold a fort there and you take responsibility and you bring in excellence into the room that you come in. No, people want to bring in mediocrity so that they can look like they're the one who's excelling. But then at the same time, they don't use the influence and spaces that they have to actually use their voices effectively to hold others accountable. Like I always go, so you're saying we must hold politicians accountable. Are you holding yourself accountable? Like how accountable are you to you? You want to hold, it doesn't start with you complaining every day. It starts with you saying, it starts with action, with like, what am I doing in my community? Am I starting a group of black dads to have a conversation? And therefore, you can't say, oh, black men are killing themselves. You can say, I'm doing something with my friends to mitigate that. You know, versus the government must come up with a program for black men not to kill themselves. Really?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I think you use the right word. There's an abdication of our responsibility. And as I speak to like lots of government people, there's an acknowledgement from this government that they have created an entitlement mindset in South Africa. You know, you'll get guys that are just chilling in the hood in the corner saying, government said they're going to give us jobs. A guy doesn't want to be a self-starter. Then you say, oh, that Somali started a spaza shop. But you have the same ability to start a starter shop, kappa, drive a car, shop, right? Drive that Uber.
Nobody wants to do that.
There's this mindset that you're not like, no, government was supposed to give us this free housing, free healthcare, free work. Therefore, I'm just going to park myself here. So like, there is an abdication of sense of responsibility of self. And
I think that for me is the most heartbreaking part. I mean, I do a lot of work in townships and I interview even young people. And I'm like, you're so young, you're already so jaded about life. Like, it's as if like, you don't see your life outside of this moment that you're in. And I'm like, okay, my parents are poor. I'm born in poverty. But isn't there like this thing that says, I want to get myself out of here. And when I'm breathing and I'm out, maybe I can bring 1, 2, 3. It's like, no, they must come find me here. And this is it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, like I said, it goes back to the entitlement. Like, you know, like, and I think also, this is in as much as economically South Africa is struggling, but I think the greater, like, it's too comfortable here, man. You know what I mean? Like in Nigeria, it's sink or swim every single day. You get a guy who's a doctor from 9 to 5, but in the evening is a DJ. So like, there's a sense of, hey, man, like if I don't get this bread, I'm not gonna eat. But
sink
in this country,
or swim. Because also, if you don't move, somebody's gonna take your spot.
Yes, but in this country, there's a sense of, if I don't get this job, I can still get the SASSA grant or mama, you know, the vibes will still be the vibes. So
wait, even in the US, there's that thing. I mean, I don't know. Maybe if it's, I'm just giving the movies too much credit. I always see women in those movies fighting to get out of social services, saying, "I want to be." They want to be out of that. Like here, people are like, "Kenyaka 350." I'm like, wait now, you want to actually to go get it instead of saying, "If I do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, therefore I don't have to take the 350." There's someone who really, really needs it, and I can use. No, there's nothing. Even if I'm working, let me find a way of how to get the 350. And then you say the government is corrupt. You're also corrupt.
There's a 100%. And there's an infantilization of people. In this country, you know, it is part of what government must do this. So people have also bought into this thing, and a big part of it, we have to intellectually look at this whole thing. Like you have to ask yourself, like, what are the contributing factors, right? One would say the media. So like a lot of also like these outlets don't reflect the majority of our nation, you know what I mean? So the media is nudging, oh, this country's going down the drain, do education, do.
Yeah, but also because when you focus on something over and over again, it grows. It becomes your reality. It becomes a story. And therefore, it's like the message is the government is doing nothing. So even if there's a lot that they're doing, you're not going to see it because no one is talking about it. But also, no one is saying, so while they're doing nothing, what are you doing? You know, it's like you have no responsibility. Like I always hear like a lot of, sometimes the so-called middle class and going on, the government is not doing this. I'm like, when do you have enough money to go build a school? Why are you not building it?
And also like, and the weird thing about this country, also like people of authority, like they pander to social media, man. Like, I mean, I'll use an example. Like, I mean, last year, I did that Tottenham Hotspur's tourism thing that obviously fell flat.
That fell flat,
It only fell flat because we pandered to what people are saying on social media. Like, the false equivalences, but there's potholes. Why are you giving your foreign team this? But like you don't like the amplification and the awareness that I was going to do to South Africa. The direct foreign investment that was going to come to this nation was going to mitigate more youth unemployment. You know, it's like little not like as a society, like we're not intellectually like addressing our challenges. You know what I mean?
That must have been a very tough time for you.
Yeah, I mean, there were calls that but some were saying, oh, this guy he's using our taxpayers' money to pay for his life in New York and what. But like, personally, it took a knock, but like, I think I knew the work was bigger than me, you know what I mean? Like, I was able to take the L for a few days. Like I said, I love taking losses, you know what I mean? Like, I knew like it was a loss that didn't make sense, you know? But the fact that didn't work out for South Africa, I think was a massive missed opportunity because, I mean, Tottenham Hotspurs, out of the top 10 most valuable sporting assets in the world, they were the only one available. So the fact that South Africa, we got the one team that was available, like, I mean, I'm talking about across sports, this is after the Yankees, the Lakers and whatnot, and Spurs was there. So can you imagine 54 million people are going to visit South Africa every single match day? Now it's going to incite people to want to travel. So I think I was more disappointed in the fact that our people just didn't see the opportunity. So,
and then when you talk about that, because like you see, when you look at like what Rwanda's been able to do in the last 18 months, 2 years, what Ghana has been able to do, they've positioned their tourism globally like that, and a lot of African Americans, and you know, they're visiting because of those. They're creating special packages and conversations that speak specifically. It's become a destination. So we kind of like, okay, I guess our comeback was Trevor. That kind of became our comeback. But I mean, the thousands of the sporting fans who are going to
enjoy that,
So I mean, I relate to that because I got into trouble for supporting the Minister of Arts and Culture about the flag.
Oh yeah, I remember that. The infamous flag.
The infamous flag. I should have a flag.
That's actually quite funny because yesterday I was driving on the highway. There's like by Hollard. There's like a massive flag on the highway. I was like, oh, there's another flag here. So
but I mean, guys. We all know the American flag because of it being everywhere.
No, we're just gonna spend 18 million. Let's respect each other.
So we're not spending 20 million on a flag, but we're spending how much on Tottenham Hotspurs?
There was like overall there was it was 650 million rand, but South Africa was gonna make that money back within a year. So part of that deal, Tottenham Hotspurs was gonna tour South Africa every pre-season. Imagine 80,000 English people descending on South Africa for
did you guys explain that? No one read the document.
No, it's because it's part of narrative and storytelling, right? Because the people that are investing in that, they're not working. People are now that are running to the daily map. So that's how you realize the adverse impact of media or the power of media. You know what I mean? Like I said, if you're not telling your own story, somebody else is gonna tell you. So by the time they tried to talk about what the benefits would have been,
it's too late.
It was the train had gone past the station, it had passed Sandton, it was already in downtown Joburg.
Gee, I was rooting for you to get Tottenham Hotspurs, but you were not rooting for me to get my flag, the one that lights up at night.
It's all love.
It's all love. It's all love.
Me, I'll always give you truth and love.
Yeah, I know. So let's talk about truth and love. You're Muslim, right?
I am a Muslim.
Okay.
Alhamdulillah.
Were you always, did you convert? How does it work?
So in Islam, we actually say revert because we believe that everybody was born Muslim, so it's going back home. So I reverted when I was 12. My father was a Muslim, so I've been practicing, I think, properly since I was 15. So it is a revert, and I think for me, Islam, I mean, it's such a I mean, I don't know what the question was going to be like, but it's such a humble religion, you know what I mean? So so I am a Muslim.
No, I'm just open to learning and understanding, like, you know, because we live in such a diverse world, and again, media propaganda, you can have a misunderstanding of what it is. So I'm just like, because I know you and the kind of a person that you are, I'm just like, so tell me about it.
And Islam is actually one of those faiths that like they bore the brunt of, you know, negative storytelling, because the Americans that always place Islam as a pariah. Like, I mean, growing up, John Rambo was fighting. Like you look at Hollywood, right? Like that's how they nudge society. I mean, like the other day I was watching. I don't know if you follow Candace Owens on Twitter or X, whatever you call it these days. And she was also apologizing to Muslims. She's like, you know what? Like post 9/11, like I just innately thought every single Muslim was a terrorist. You know what I mean? And it's so unfortunate because the language, the religion of Islam, we're led by love. I mean, we greet each other. We say, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. You know what I mean? So it goes back to that narrative and storytelling. So, but now you're seeing a lot more people getting knowledge of Islam. It's a religion of peace, and obviously we're seeing what's happening in another part of the world that we shouldn't talk about. Like, so like that's also helping to reintroduce people to that religion. I think the world only now is starting to see Islam for what it is. You know what I mean?
But I think different religions are going through that, and also individuals are taking power in giving themselves permission to practice whatever, to explore and practice the way they want. And I think post-COVID, that's what it did to the world, because everything came to a standstill, and it was a question of like no churches, no gathering, and then the question became, so what's your faith based on? You know?
And you're right. And I think the pandemic definitely, like, people haven't had to slow it down. Like, people like questioned a lot of things. You know, like, I mean,
and we had to.
Relationships, careers, religion. So you're right. And I think people did the work themselves. You know, they need to like to learn.
Okay. So we are having these conversations because, you know, it's 30 years of democracy. It's really like a celebration. You love music. Okay. So these conversations are about finding ourselves in the last 30 years and how we've contributed to the narrative of our country. And music plays a significant role. So when you look back to like music that you loved as a 13-year-old South African post 94, what were you listening to at the time?
I mean, I grew up on Bob Marley, but in the South African context, Mosito, so Sankomota was
nice.
Massive. I went to St. Martin's where the great HUGH MASEKELA went, so like MASEKELA's music drives me a lot. But there's also this guy, legend from my hometown, Jabulani Tsambo. So I obviously grew up
Double
with,
HP.
I obviously grew up with Jabu, Atebe, you know.
Lenyora.
There was another group, Afihlile, very, very much Mafike and Crowded Crew. You know, so like I'm very much, I'm very regionally proud in my music. So so like, I'd say like top of mind, I'd say Sankomota, you know, MASEKELA, TKZ obviously, you know, because I saw a lot of myself in those guys, you know. So I mean, but I think the music that's always carried me and the song that I always go back to, Kipapaya, Sankomota, and then Tumamina. Unfortunately, some of my poser messed it up, but Tumamina,
that's a precedent.
You know,
Okay. So, Bafitlile, Merafe. Okay. All right. That's cool.
Yeah, my range is very diverse.
And you got to work with Nas on top of that.
Yeah, Nas, he's a legend, you know. And I remember the one story. So, like, I got to spend a whole weekend on Nas, which is insane. So, like, we talked about so many things. Funny enough, he says, he's a guy from New York, but funny enough, he says the coldest he's ever been was that, I don't know if you were at that castle, Centurion. It was the coldest day.
No, was I at the Castle Light one? No, I was at the Heineken one in Braamfontein. I saw him when he came to the...
There was one where he played with an orchestra,
Go Centurion.
At the cricket. And I remember that day, I was wearing Chuck Taylors. That was the last day in my life I've ever worn
Chuck Taylors.
It was so cold, you know. So I mean, I've had the opportunity to build it now.
He says that's the coldest he's ever.
And he's a guy from like I said, he's from Queens, like he's from New York City, cold as hell. But like, I guess and I think it's an education thing, because you probably thought I'm going to
Africa. It's so hot.
Get cold there, so now, I mean, his music, Kendrick Lamar is also somebody that I've worked very closely with. So from a music perspective, I've been blessed to work with a lot of people that I've idolized. Khwapela is also another one. She's actually coming next month. I need to get you to interview her. She's a good friend of mine. So now, also part of her journey is like she wants to sort of reintroduce herself to South African, like earn her stripes as a South African.
So those guys, I mean, when they look at our story and our narrative, what are their thoughts on South Africa? Do you guys have those kind of conversations?
It's vast. I mean, but for the most part, they are so ignorant to our story as a people. You know what I mean? Like they still blanket their point of view. And it's about Africa. Mutwatenganti's book to go to Gabon. Like, it's a lot of ignorance. But they've been found wanting, like, because ignorance can't be bliss anymore, you know what I mean?
And social media is like, they're always exposing themselves.
Because it's real time, you know what I mean? So I think social media is actually forcing people to actually, like, do the work and try, like, have a broader knowledge of our continent.
Okay. All right. So as we wrap up, South Africa 30 years from now, what's your dream for this nation of ours?
My dream is I want to see South Africa take its leadership role in this world. Like South Africa really is the moral compass of this world, purely because I think we're driven by this beautiful humanist philosophy of Ubuntu. You know what I mean? Because as South Africans, we define ourselves by how great of human beings we are to the next person.
But some people are saying that has been costly to us.
Depending on what, like economically, yes. We're seeing multinationals pull out of our country. You know what I mean? But so yes, if we want to be judged by the ways of the world, yes, it's been costly. But if we want to add if we want to add humanity to the world, South Africans definitely need to take a leadership role. So I really want to see this country also participating more in the African dialogue. I really want us to embrace being Pan-African as a nation, and also globally, as our culture is ascending, I want to see a lot more South Africans participating.
Because I think on policy we are. The work that we've done, for example, at the AU, we had Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma there. We've been a very strong voice on the continent and things. But I think it's on the everyday life basis. And those of us who are in the creative space, we can say it has afforded us to be in there. All these big entertainment companies coming to our country, launching here. I think I was looking at some numbers the other day in terms of productions that have been done on the continent. Netflix has done more productions in South Africa versus what they've done in Nigeria. And we're there. But I think we are, it's like in silos. So if it's happening in film, we're not connecting it to music, connecting it to fashion. Fashion has done that. I've worked with a lot of designers. I remember them coming here in 2010 to showcase, and they still have good relationships and clientele. But it's you're not seeing the thing merging as a collective, so to say.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not amplifying our greatness beyond just being a tourist destination, beyond just being apartheid survivalists. So that is actually quite some of the work that I'm doing with Brand South Africa, because I live outside the borders of this country, and they've foisted with being our mouthpiece. So now I'm saying, guys, as some of us exist in these global cities, we have to tell our stories. We have to be broader in the telling of our stories. We're not just a tourist destination. You know what I mean? So, like I'm saying, but this goes back to one. I think taking ownership of where we are as a nation, having the right people that are telling us in these leadership positions and seeing what the gaps are, because the gaps are glaring. You know what I mean? And us normal citizens, sometimes I always say I probably do a better job as an ambassador of this nation than people that are paid to do that.
To do their job.
So I think it's a sense of pride and from where I'm from.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that being inculcated in a lot more people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. We're going to do that.
Nice one.
Nice one. I just had to shake on that. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
Mosito, thank you for the rhythm.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you for the rhythm.
And it's going to keep going on, alhamdulillah. As long as I'm alive, like I said, I'm a paragon of this nation. I'm going to keep leaving that door ajar for the next dope black South African, dope white South African. I really am a vessel of this country. And I always say to my friends that the remainder of my life is going to be a love letter to South Africa. I live my life like that every single day.
Yeah, we need that. We need that. We need to be in love with this country, to walk with it in love and do things for the love of this country.
Yeah.
So what's with this thing of you folding your arms in your pictures?
So the irony, I'm a socially very awkward person. It's however to normally I'll just do this and just hide away, but then it just became a thing, and it just became a thing, and now it's a signature. They call it the Mosito pose. I need to trademark that, by the way.
Yeah, it's done.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Peace.
Peace.
That was good.